And we're live. So, have some time today. I figured I might as well be value added. Let's talk about progressive overload. So, progressive overload is sort of a mantra in the bodybuilding community, right? It's like you have to lift heavier to get bigger, otherwise, there's no progress. And personally, I think that's not true. That's actually a lot of nonsense. So while I do believe that you have to progress, I think that progressive overload is actually vastly, vastly overrated. Okay? So the reason why I think it's overrated is because it puts people into the wrong mindset. So when you're always being told you gotta lift heavier, you gotta do this to get bigger, then you will do whatever to lift heavier, right? But the problem with that is that doesn't mean you are getting bigger or better. So what I mean by this? So when people are so focused on it, they have to lift heavier. Number one, they will train mainly with mid-range motions, such as the leg press, the bench, the squat, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because that's where they can move the most weight, okay? So the strength curve goes like this, right? So there's stretch, mid-range, and contracted. But people will not work the bookends of the strength curve because you can't make a lot of progress there. The problem with that is that leads to a physique that's like somewhat, hunched forward and too tight because all you're doing is the mid-range, but you don't work in the stretch or the contracted position. So the choice of exercises is going to be suboptimal when you're always focused on adding weight, because it's much easier to add weight, let's say on the lat pull down, than on the dumbbell pullover. The dumbbell pullover being the stretch position for the lats, and the lat pull down being the mid range, right? So I'm just gonna do lat pull down and rows and deadlifts for my back. I'm not gonna do stiff arm pull downs and pullovers, thereby neglecting a lot of muscle building potential, right? Does that make sense? Good. Number two, progressive overload and the pressure of always needing to add more weight leads to micro cheating, in my opinion. So let's say you're doing, flies, right? And you're doing this pretty good, like 40 pounds or whatever, right? And then the next day, the next week, you're doing 45, but now you're doing this and this, right? So you're taking your arms in a little bit. So now I'm moving much less, bit more weight, that is true, but I'm actually doing less work. So now my joints are taking more of a hit, but my muscles don't get any more work, right? Because I'm like, okay, I did 40s last week, now I gotta do 45s, and then I'm kind of doing like this, and they're moving somewhat, right? Or like I do a lat pull down, and then I finish like this, I don't finish like that. So like, yeah, I moved more weight, but did I really do anything? And the answer is no, you didn't, right? You moved more weight, but your ligaments did it and your joints. So that's micro cheating. It's like I'm taking an inch off, or for the Europeans, 2 centimeters here. And so then there's more weight in my little notebook, But I didn't really do it, My joints, however, they did it. So I'm going to get that grinding on those problems with that issue. So micro cheating, that's a huge problem. And then number three, is the wrong activation. So let's say I'm doing a lat pull down, right? So from the side, if I may turn, this is it, right? So now my lat is fully stretched, so it's pretty weak. So now my body is like, oh, I got an idea. Let's use the lower traps and the rhomboids, and I do this. And then I pull my lat, right? When I should be doing this, like slide forward, okay? So again, because I was so focused on moving more weight, I actually used the wrong muscle. So now my lat exercise became a trap rhomboid exercise. So again, yes, there's more weight in your book, but your target muscle didn't move it. Henceforth, you didn't make any more progress, right? So the same goes, let's say, for a chest fly. So you do a chest fly, your pec is really weak, okay, here. But your delt is really strong. So your body's like, oh, I got an idea, let's do this, right? but you have to do this, right? So it's almost like your body is set in evolution. It's like, oh, Frank wants to move this big weight. I got this muscle, is ready to go, but it's not the muscle you want to train. But if your main focus is on progressive overload, man, I gotta move this weight, I gotta get this done, then you just will use whatever muscle you're having. And yes, you will move the weight, but as a bodybuilder, it doesn't really do much for you, right? So there's a big difference between moving weight and proper activation, right? I mean, we've all seen guys like doing a bicep curl, right? And starting like this, right? So now it's more like a lower back delt exercise, but not so much a bicep curl. And then lastly, the fourth issue is when people train progressive overload, they don't shorten the muscle. So the shortening of the muscle is really where growth occurs, because that's when you squeeze, by definition, the contractile fibers together. But you know, who from you like has seen a lat pull down in the gym that ends like this, right? So it's like it's going well, it's going well, it's going well, and then this happens, right? Why? Because this is really hard, because my lat here is really weak, right? So I'm gonna use my biceps and everything else I'm having, maybe even my abs, to get this weight down, right? But now I haven't really finished the lat pull down, and I kind of took away the major growth potential I could be having by shortening my lats here, right? So the same is like with the pecs, like I'm really weak here, so let me do this. So that's not to say that you shouldn't add more weight, but you should only add more weight if you're covering the strength curve, you're using the right muscles, you're shortening the muscle, and you're able to execute each rep as well as you can, right? So as always, you know, like don't be a slave, or like don't get pigeonholed because people say, oh, you gotta do X. Always question, well, why should I do this, right? And just moving more weight to move more weight is just really a dumb idea. It will get you injured, it will get you burned out, and you will not make progress, right? So keep in mind, you must absolutely pick exercises that cover all ends of the strength curve, the stretch and the contracted. Those are the uncomfortable ones, right? Such as the sissy squat, leg extension all the way through, and so on and so forth. Then you have to avoid, and we're all guilty of this, micro cheating, right? So we're all like, you know, I'm curling, and I'm getting weak. I'm like, let me do this, right? But now, again, this wasn't a good curl anymore. So we must keep the distance and the tension as well as we can. And then you also have to keep in mind that we need to activate the proper muscle, right? So always think, okay, what am I training here? What muscle do I want to make short? And then the question is, how do I get there? As opposed to, oh, I got this weight, it has to go from A to B, right? Like, that's evolution. That's like fighting the mammoths, running away. You know, that was cool, like in the Ice Age. But for bodybuilding, it really doesn't yield much, right? So you want to be in a position where, like, okay, I want to shorten this muscle, and then really bring the shortening to a full stop. Like, for instance, in a tricep press down, right? It's much easier to end like here in front of you as opposed to going all the way through. Like, this is really difficult. But that's where growth occurs. Okay? So if you can master those four things, you'll be in great shape. All right, guys? Have an awesome rest of the week, and see you soon. Mike out.